Attention all F1 fans, welcome to F1 Max. Are you tired of Red Bull's dominance in Formula 1? Fret not, as F1 Max explore the 5 big rule changes that the FIA could implement to reel in the championship frontrunners. Mercedes and Renault were both subject to some ingenious changes in the past, and Ferrari even suffered from one of the most bizarre rule changes in F1 history. Red Bull is currently on a hot streak, and the FIA could have to make some bold moves to prevent another tedious title race. Stay tuned as we explore the tactics that the FIA could use to take on the Red Bull challenge. One of the teams who's been hurt the most by Red Bull's blistering pace is Mercedes. They've been nowhere near the fastest car on the grid for the past few seasons, and no doubt Toto Wolff has likely been on the phone to the FIA, trying to slow down the RB19. Considering the dominance that Mercedes had during the hybrid era, they're very familiar with rule changes aimed at reeling in dominant teams. The FIA were never afraid to make changes targeted at Mercedes, even in the very first season that the Silver Arrows were dominating. In the very first year of the brand new hybrid engines, it was clear that Mercedes had nailed the new design. Despite Red Bull being at the front of the grid for the back end of the 2013 season, Mercedes won the first 6 races of 2014. By the midway point of the year, it was clear that Mercedes had the fastest car on the grid by quite a margin. So it was hardly surprising that the FIA decided to step in. Prior to the German Grand Prix, the FIA announced that the use of the front and rear interconnected suspension, or FRICS, was against the rules as it was a movable aerodynamic design. It may not seem like this is a targeted move as all the teams use the FRICS system. That technology had been in use for 5 years when the FIA decided it was against the rules. But Mercedes had gotten the best out of the design, and it was thought that this move could derail Mercedes' season. It didn't. While Red Bull would win the 2 races after Germany, Mercedes quickly took back control and won the final 7 races of the year to finish with almost 300 more points than Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. This was not the first time that the FIA introduced a rule change in the middle of the season, which was secretly designed to slow down the dominant team. Back when Renault were winning championships with Fernando Alonso, they had an exceptionally clever new design. Towards the end of the 2005 season, Renault had discovered a device called a mass damper. It was a free-moving weight which was inside the nose cone. It sounds like adding more weight to the car would surely just make it slower, but that's not the case. That is because the device acted as a counterweight, which kept the front wing as close to the ground as possible. This kept the car settled and therefore allowed it to ride the curbs a lot easier. Renault could customize the weight to each track and therefore have higher downforce when they needed. The device was so effective that Renault put one on the rear of the car as well. Teams started to realize that the mass damper was giving Renault a big advantage, and the FIA ruled that this device broke the movable aerodynamic device rule. The French team knew that a rule change was coming, and so they removed the device from their car. Unlike the Mercedes rule change, this was a huge change to the title race. From the German Grand Prix onwards, Ferrari got back into the title race, and Fernando Alonso only won 1 race the second half of the year. Renault were very open that the rule change had a huge effect on the Renault car, so a much more effective rule change from the FIA. Ferrari were one of the teams pushing for the FIA to do something about the dominant Renault team in 2006, as they had been on the wrong end of an FIA rule change the prior year. The Scuderia were the dominant team in the 2000s, in part thanks to the Bridgestone tyres, which had great performance but slightly less longevity. So the FIA introduced one of the strangest rules in the history of the sport for 2005. They banned tyre changes. That's right, the FIA banned tyre changes. Teams had to use just 1 set of tyres through the entirety of qualifying and the race. That is insane longevity, especially as today, teams use at least 4 sets of tyres for qualifying and the race. Not only did it ruin Ferrari's chances in 2005, but it was an all-round dangerous rule. We saw Kimi Raikkonen's suspension explode on the final lap of the European Grand Prix because he couldn't pit to change a flat-spotted tyre. While the rule change was extremely dangerous, it did have the effect that the FIA wanted. Ferrari were nowhere near the dominant team they had been previously, with McLaren and Renault the 2 teams at the front of the grid in 2005. This rule was a one-season wonder, with pit stops for tyre changes returning in 2006. Still, it is crazy the lengths that the FIA will go to so that they can create a title race. Adrian Newey is seen as the greatest aerodynamic mind in F1 history. He's been finding loopholes in the FIA's rules for decades. The double diffuser was a huge bit of technical innovation at the start of 2009 that was crucial in Brawn winning the title. Red Bull nailed the design better than any other team in the next couple of years. Essentially, Red Bull were able to keep their diffuser sealed for more of the lap because the exhaust output ran over the diffusers. Most teams were using a similar diffuser design to Red Bull, but none quite had mastered the design like Red Bull had. They were the dominant team in 2011, thanks in part to their diffuser design, which ensured that downforce was generated throughout the entirety of corners. The Red Bull was exceptionally fast, especially through the corners, and so the FIA tried to step in to slow them down. At the British Grand Prix in 2011, the FIA attempted to ban Red Bull's design, making them give up the blown diffuser. It seemed to work in the short term as Fernando Alonso beat Sebastian Vettel to the race win. But the ban did not stick past that race because the teams could not agree on the exact rule change. As the diffuser design benefited all teams, the FIA found it very difficult to agree on exactly what they would ban. I'm sure this was partly because other teams were copying Red Bull's design. With all of this infighting, the FIA eventually got tired of trying to ban the exhaust-blown diffusers mid-season, and instead introduced the ban for 2012. It may seem like the rule change didn't work, as Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull won the title again the next year with the ban in place. But the margin was much closer with the ban in place, so I guess it actually worked out pretty well for the FIA. The first time that the FIA tried to stop Adrian Newey's design was when he was part of the team that introduced active suspension. Newey helped to design the all-conquering Williams car of the early 1990s, which featured active suspension. It made the Williams an incredibly fast car, much faster than any of the other cars on the grid. Not only did the Williams car use active suspension, but Adrian Newey helped incorporate ABS, traction control, and semi-automatic transmission to the car. By 1994, the FIA were looking to shut down the amount of new technology that Williams were using. They outright banned active suspension, as well as banning the brand new transmission system that Williams had spent a huge amount of resources on. It hurt Williams a huge amount as the entire design philosophy was based around creating an active car that uses the newest technology. It opened the door for Benetton and Michael Schumacher to move to the front of the grid, with the German claiming his first world championship. These examples show that the FIA are not afraid to step in when one team is stretching out a lead over the rest of the field. At the moment, it may be too early to say that Red Bull are running away with both titles. They have been the fastest team in the first 3 races of the season. What the FIA don't want is a boring title race where one team is better than the rest every week. The whole reason for the FIA introducing the spending cap rules was to stop one team outperforming the rest. It kinda makes the new rules look a little bit stupid when Red Bull are the fastest car by such a huge margin. It makes the FIA look even more stupid when you remember that this is the season where Red Bull are supposed to be feeling the effects of the fine and wind tunnel punishment for overspending in 2021. Doesn't seem like that penalty is having a massive impact on Christian Horner's team right now. Red Bull's biggest advantage seems to be on the straights when they have the DRS open. Perhaps the FIA could step in and tighten up the regulations around the beam wing and diffuser, as this seems to be where Red Bull are getting a lot of their straight line speed. Red Bull have played around with the design of the floor and the beam wing to get more speed out of the RB19, and other teams have not yet figured out how to copy their design. The difficulty that the FIA face is that the more they tighten the rules around design innovation, the sport becomes less about who can build the best car. Formula 1 is supposed to be a team sport, with whoever can build the fastest car supposed to make as much difference as the fastest driver. There should be a way for the FIA to bring the field closer together without ruining the integrity of the sport. So what do you think? Should the FIA step in to slow Red Bull down, like they have in the past? If the FIA do step in, what rule change could they make to make the title race a bit more interesting? Why not put your thoughts in the comments down below? While you're down there, why not hit that like button and subscribe? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.